Life can change in an instant. Picture this: a wealthy woman sitting in her wheelchair, silver hair falling past her shoulders, staring out the window of a luxury nursing home. Everyone whispers about her. She's Mrs. Grace, wife of the famous actor Nicholas Grace. They envy her supposed perfect life, her husband's success, the charity foundation named after her. But behind those whispers lies a devastating truth. After 40 years of marriage, her husband found comfort in another woman's arms while she lay paralyzed. Her own son turned his back on her. The nursing home became her prison, paid for by a husband who never visited. But Grace refused to fade away. She had a secret weapon, one that would help her walk again and expose the lies that destroyed her life. This isn't just another story about betrayal. It's about a woman who lost everything, only to discover she was stronger than anyone imagined. Watch as Grace transforms from a forgotten wife into someone who brings down an empire built on decades of deception. Her revenge? It's served with a smile that hides years of pain. Want to know how she does it? Stay tuned to witness one of the most shocking comebacks you'll ever see. Every minute of this story will keep you guessing, because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. If you love stories about justice, redemption, and sweet revenge, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The system's recognition came too late. There I sat, a shell of my former self, an elderly woman with silver hair cascading down my shoulders, confined to a wheelchair. When it apologized, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony of my situation. "What did you achieve with your host's points?" it asked. I raised my weary eyes, my fingers trembling as I counted off my life's supposed achievements: a stable marriage, my husband's successful career, children, and then the illness that changed everything. "But what did you keep for yourself?" the system pressed. I had tried. I really had. But fate had other plans. At 68, a devastating car accident left me wheelchair-bound. The aftermath was even more crushing. My husband Nicholas found comfort in Tanmai's arms, rekindling an old flame, while my son turned his back on me. The nursing home became my waiting room for death. The system paused, contemplating my story before offering compensation. "Let me be who I was when I first arrived," I whispered. "Return all those points I earned." I remembered that young girl I used to be, always wearing a smile that could light up a room. Now, my only warmth came from the autumn sun as my caregiver wheeled me outside for my daily sunbath. The whispers followed me everywhere in this high-end facility. "That's Nicholas Grace's wife," they'd say, their voices a mix of awe and curiosity. My room was indeed luxurious, with a dedicated team of caregivers attending to my needs. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my youth, I had everything I wanted, and now in my twilight years, I resided in the most prestigious nursing home, all thanks to my husband's continued success in the entertainment industry. The other residents' gazes told different stories: envy, indifference, and sometimes pure disdain. We all ended up here, regardless of our past glory. To them, I was just another elderly woman who got lucky in her youth, marrying a rising star. They'd reminisce about Nicholas's fame, how video stores once showcased his movies prominently. Some even kept his old posters, hoping he'd visit someday to sign them. But he never came. My memories started playing tricks on me, fading like old photographs. Still, my presence caused quite a stir during social hours. Being Mrs. Grace meant endless discussions about Nicholas during afternoon tea. The other residents would gather around, addressing me with forced politeness, praising my husband's dedication to his craft and his later transition to philanthropy. "Nicholas always shines," they'd say. "Such a devoted husband." I'd respond with a practiced smile and carefully chosen words, keeping my responses brief. But secrets have a way of spreading, and soon everyone knew the truth. Nicholas and I had been living separate lives for years, bound only by the chains of public appearance and obligation. For decades, Nicholas maintained our relationship purely out of duty. The whispers about us grew louder in the nursing home, and this time, I didn't bother correcting them. Unlike my husband, I wasn't trained to face cameras with a practiced smile, discussing my health conditions as if he kept track of every detail. The truth was, he couldn't even spare a moment to call or visit. The residents loved discussing Nicholas's charitable work. Did you hear? They'd gossip during afternoon tea. He's built libraries for children in the mountains. Now he's starting a campaign for children with leukemia. They'd glance at me with what seemed like admiration. You're blessed to have such a virtuous husband. Little did they know about Grace Goody, the charity foundation bearing my name, but never having felt my touch. In interviews, Nicholas painted a beautiful picture of our love story. He described me as his guardian angel, appearing during his darkest hours to guide him toward the light. This image of the devoted husband became his trademark in his later years. After all, in the cutthroat entertainment industry, lasting marriages were as rare as shooting stars. The foundation had two directors, Nicholas and someone else. But it wasn't me walking alongside him, comforting those in need. It was Vivian, though my son Adrian tried to justify it all. "Mom, stop being so petty," he'd scold. "Dad's doing all this for you. He's not young anymore, yet he's still working hard. Isn't that enough?" Adrian would remind me of the expensive care I received. "Your medical bills, treatments, special nutrition. Dad always chooses the best. Miss Vivian helps because she sees his dedication. You know how Dad is, a perfectionist who can't trust strangers." He'd praise Vivian endlessly, the privileged young lady who willingly endured mountain hardships for charity work. The truth about Vivian hit me like a ton of bricks just a month ago. During a family visit, my grandson excitedly showed me a video on his phone. "Look, Grandpa's new charity work," he exclaimed innocently. The footage showed Nicholas, ever the humanitarian, diving into charitable projects right after wrapping up his latest film. There he stood in his perfectly tailored black suit, spouting his usual lines about finding fulfillment in helping others. But what caught my attention was how he introduced the foundation's new director. "Ms. Vivian has been my close friend for many years," he said, his eyes softening in a way they hadn't for me in decades. "She's been an integral part of our charitable mission." Under the glare of camera flashes, Vivian glided onto the stage in her elegant cheongsam, pearls gleaming at her throat. "We share the same vision," Nicholas declared, his eyes following her with unmistakable admiration. Through my grandson's phone screen, I watched my husband's face light up as Vivian addressed the crowd, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Nicholas couldn't stop singing her praises. "Elegant, kind, gentle," he gushed, explaining how the mountain children had lovingly dubbed her Grandma Vivian. When a sharp-eyed reporter noted her long-standing involvement with the charity, Nicholas didn't hesitate. "Indeed, Miss Vivian has been invaluable to our work. Age never stops her from being on the front lines, handling everything personally without complaint. Her appointment as director was unanimous." My heart clenched as I studied her pearl necklace, an exact replica of mine. "How long has Vivian been part of our family's circle?" I asked my son, watching him squirm under my gaze. His stammered response about merely meeting her while picking up his father rang hollow. "The pearls," I pressed on, knowing such rare quality couldn't be coincidental. My son swallowed hard. 3 months ago, it was a gift from me to you." Before he could fumble through more excuses, my daughter-in-law stepped in with brutal honesty. "We met her 2 years ago at Dad's birthday dinner. Our companies work together, and she's Dad's old friend. We see her occasionally." The silence that followed was deafening. My son's frown deepened as he launched into a defensive speech. "Mom, what good would telling you have done? Their relationship is pure. Why create misunderstandings? She's helped me tremendously in business. I'm pushing 40 with a family to support and a career to maintain. His parting words cut deeper than any knife. I don't ask much of you, Mom. Just don't make things difficult. Then came the final blow, delivered with a heavy sigh. In your condition, you can't help me anyway. Your care costs a fortune. Dad's pouring money into charity, and my company's struggling. You've had your share of glory as Nicholas Grace's wife. You can't expect everything to stay perfect forever. The story about a recent banquet twisted the knife further. Someone had mistaken Vivian for Mrs. Grace. Me. She'd responded with a demure smile, while Nicholas, after a moment of surprise, had laughed it off. Oh no, he joked. She's much too young to be my wife. Vivian was everything I wasn't. A delicate hothouse flower who had never known hardship. Her hands were soft, unscarred by years of kitchen work, her beauty untouched by life's storms. As I reflected on this, the system finally spoke up, its voice heavy with regret. Host, you've endured so much. I should never have left you stranded in this world for so long. The truth was almost funny now. I was just a forgotten task performer, lost when the system malfunctioned. My mission had been simple: help Nicholas succeed, then leave. He wasn't what you'd call traditionally handsome back then, with his gentle eyes and refined features that didn't match the rugged stars of that era. Fresh out of film academy, he was already nursing a broken heart. His childhood sweetheart had married another and left the country. I still remember the day we met. He was huddled in the winter cold, making a meal of a cheap steamed bun. I approached him with my brightest smile. Hi, I'm Grace, your fan. Those early days were brutal. Rejection after rejection at auditions, while I juggled 3 jobs to keep his dream alive. Not out of love, no. I told myself it was just to complete my mission and return home faster. 5 years we struggled together. My hands bore the scars of countless cuts from working in kitchens. Then came his first break, a small supporting role. I stood outside the theater in my stained kitchen apron, staring at the tiny photo of his face tucked in the corner of the movie poster. Nobody else gave this unknown supporting actor a second glance, but I stood there touching his image, grinning like a fool. Everything changed after that. Nicholas's star rose meteorically, transforming him from a nobody into everyone's somebody. I kept waiting for my mission completion notice, but instead, I got something else, a marriage proposal during the celebration of his 5th film. My system had vanished without a trace, leaving me stranded in this world. The proposal was grand and public, with Nicholas in a crisp new suit, rose in hand. He knelt before me under the spotlight. Thank you. Will you marry me? The timing was risky. He had just hit fame and was now revealing a girlfriend with a very public proposal. His fan base consisted mainly of young girls entranced by his looks. One wrong move could send him tumbling back to those days of cold rooms and meager meals. The aftermath was chaos. Some fans broke down in tears, others lashed out in rage. As the reality of my permanent exile in this world sank in, a fan smashed a beer bottle against Nicholas's head. I found myself pressed against his chest as he shielded me, his blood staining my dress. The memory of his protective embrace seemed like a dream now. Don't be afraid, he had said back then. These days, I could barely remember his voice speaking my pet name, seeing him only through the cold barrier of screens. My system broke the harsh truth about our finances. The joint assets between you and Nicholas are almost gone. Your money went 2 ways, the system explained clinically. Part funded our son's startup, while the rest vanished into the charity fund. That account? It's in Nicholas's name alone now, and oddly enough, there haven't been any charitable withdrawals lately. The irony was bitter. The Grace Goody charity, built on Nicholas's image as the devoted husband, had attracted enough public donations to fund itself. He hadn't needed to spend a penny of his own money. Since my illness, he hadn't spent a penny on me either. The system's confusion was almost touching. Why is he being so cautious? Your share of the money is practically gone. I could only offer a weak smile, no longer having the energy to chase answers. The love we once shared had withered long ago, replaced by something colder, more calculated. The truth about Nicholas and Vivian spanned 2 decades. When her husband died, Nicholas flew abroad personally to bring her back. Only my severe illness had given him the excuse to finally acknowledge their relationship publicly. Now, I focused on my immediate goal, restoring my legs, though it would cost me some of my accumulated points. The system confirmed it would take a week before I could stand again, but the price was steep. As I pondered this, a certain justice seemed appropriate. These legs were broken because of Nicholas, so why shouldn't he pay the price? His acting career, built on fame I had helped create, might be enough compensation. I remembered using points to save his career after that reckless public proposal, a move that should have destroyed him. Instead, I had turned it into his lucky break, letting everyone believe it was his natural charm that won them over. The memory of that snowy night 2 years ago surfaced. Nicholas's film shoot accident that had indirectly led to my current state. I had rushed out to help him, only to end up in a devastating car crash. While he walked away with scratches, I spent 3 days fighting for my life in the ICU. Adrian told me how his father had stayed outside my room the entire time, his carefully maintained appearance crumbling. The polished actor, known for his immaculate presence, had aged visibly in those 3 days, his hair graying overnight, looking like any other worried old man in the hospital corridors. I hadn't known the whole truth about those 3 days in the ICU. Yes, Nicholas had sat there, his vacant eyes fixed on nothing, his hand gentle on mine as he whispered comfort. But Vivian had been there too, her hand clasped in his as he trembled with relief. "Thank goodness you're here," he told her. "Thank goodness." They say crisis brings people together. How ironic that my accident, the one that robbed me of my ability to walk, had cemented their bond. "Confirmed," my system declared. "Trading his artistic reputation for your legs is a fair exchange. After all, you created his success." When I finally stood again, it was a victory claimed inch by painful inch. The medical staff watched in amazement as I gripped the railing, forcing my resistant legs to carry me to the balcony. Every step was agony. My muscles, stiff from disuse, screamed in protest as pain shot through my entire nervous system. But I refused all help, determined to reach the balcony on my own. 3 years had passed since I'd last felt fresh air on my face. The doctors called it a miracle, and I played along, smiling at their wonder. "It must be Mr. Nicholas's blessings finally working," they said. The doctor kept telling me how Nicholas constantly inquired about my health, how he'd been speechless with joy upon hearing about my recovery. "Your husband is overjoyed. He could barely speak on the phone. He's probably rushing here now." I wondered, was he really happy or just disappointed that I hadn't withered away in this nursing home as planned, like dried grass crumbling into nothing? But it wasn't Nicholas who came first. It was Vivian, standing in my doorway in a dark red dress and black velvet gloves, clutching a bouquet of sunflowers. "Sister Grace?" she called me, her voice honey-sweet, her demeanor perfectly composed. It reminded me of how Nicholas once described his ex-girlfriend who'd married another, a delicate flower, naive to the world's ways. Now here was Vivian, offering congratulations, explaining that Nicholas was still at the airport, but she'd happened to be nearby. I arched an eyebrow, my face carefully blank as I instructed the staff to remove the sunflowers. Nicholas had once told the media his wife was like a sunflower, an invincible warrior. What he'd never mentioned publicly was my severe allergy to them. Vivian's innocent gesture revealed her true colors. "You should call me Mrs. Grace," I said, meeting her gaze with steel in mine. "Miss Vivian, For someone who's lived abroad so long, you still cling to such outdated, childish games. Two women serving one man? And you think you should call me sister? My words hit their mark. Vivian's composed facade cracked as she set her teacup down with barely controlled force. "Grace," she said softly, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "you've been ill for so long. I won't argue with someone who's unwell. We're both in our twilight years. I don't want anyone to have regrets. Living abroad taught me to follow my heart. I respect Nicholas's feelings. I can't help it." I couldn't contain my laughter, harsh and bitter. Years don't bring maturity. They just thicken your skin. Is this what you teach your students? To be shameless? To respect unspoken feelings? To sympathize with the other woman? My words struck home. Panic flashed across her face. She had rushed here, terrified that my recovery might bring Nicholas back to me. She clearly didn't know about the divorce papers I'd already sent through my lawyer. "Really?" she asked, confusion dancing in her eyes. "You're actually agreeing?" In her world, I was supposed to play the dutiful wife, clinging on, suffering in silence, swallowing my pride to save face. Such proper etiquette, the one in the inferior position should appear dirtier, more despicable, like teaching children to share with the less fortunate. I'd prepared farewell gifts for every resident in the nursing home, playing my part one last time. They gathered at the gates to bid me farewell, calling me lucky, one of the few who walked out on their own feet. "Mrs. Grace, you can return to charity work with Mr. Nicholas now. We wish you both happiness." I signaled my driver to stop, stepping out for one final gesture. "My name is Grace," I announced simply. They nodded, dropping the Mrs., though the nursing home records still bore that title. My phone rang in the car, his voice, almost forgotten. "Grace, what game are you playing?" Nicholas spat. "You're half dead already, yet you're making a spectacle of yourself?" He'd seen my confrontation with Vivian on TV, his precious reputation at stake. "Oh, I apologize," I replied coldly. "I forgot. In your plan, I was supposed to die. Sorry for recovering and spoiling everything." The memory surfaced, overhearing my doctor's report to Nicholas, back when his messages had dwindled to occasional two-word replies, "busy." The doctor, still showing me respect, had detailed my condition, predicting my remaining time. Confined within four walls, abandoned by husband and son, the emotional pain had far outweighed the physical. My will to live had flickered like a dying candle. The doctor's words echoed in my memory. I wouldn't survive the next winter unless things changed. He'd urged my family to spend more time with me, but Nicholas had conveniently ignored this. He was waiting for nature to take its course, already planning his performance at my funeral, the grieving husband's final act, milking decades of our supposed love story. Then he'd play the lonely widower, using age as his excuse to officially welcome Vivian into his life. "Where did you hear such nonsense?" he'd protested earlier. 40 years of marriage. Your recovery makes me the happiest man alive." Such hollow words. I should have known sooner that a skilled actor could fool not just his audience, but his wife of decades. "Nicholas," I'd asked, "doesn't it exhaust you, living between your roles and reality?" Coming home, I found my son's family already there. My grandson rushed forward with carnations, his innocent kiss warming my cheek. "Welcome home, Grandma." The house remained exactly as I'd left it before the nursing home, though now the renewed activity made it feel smaller. "Mom, Dad says you want a divorce. Why?" Adrian looked worn out, as if my recovery had become just another problem in his busy life. My daughter-in-law tugged at his sleeve, trying to maintain peace, but couldn't stop his outburst. "Because your father had an affair." My quiet statement made Nicholas, perched stiffly on the sofa, explode. "Grace, you're being irrational, spreading unfounded rumors. What happened between Vivian and me was years ago. As my wife, how dare you speak so carelessly? I'm a public figure. One word can destroy reputations. He sat there in his gold-rimmed glasses, ramrod straight, voice dripping with authority. His pressure was suffocating, especially for someone just recovered from near death. Interesting, I noted. I hadn't even named her, yet you're already defending Vivian. I revealed the voice recorder, playing Vivian's shameless confession. My son stared at the floor while my daughter-in-law turned away, lips pressed tight. Nicholas froze, shocked by Vivian's reckless admission. She's not reckless, I explained. She was testing you. If you'd known, she would have advanced further. If not, she'd have pushed me more. Mom, Adrian finally stepped forward to support me, though his resolve had clearly weakened. I pushed his hand away with a cold smile. Are you complicit too? Then I turned to Nicholas, still fuming on the sofa. I don't care what others think of you. The scene opens with a tense confrontation between mother and son, their voices echoing through the family home. Adrian stands before me, his father's features etched across his face so precisely it almost hurts to look at him. The genetic inheritance is almost cruel in its perfection, like a constant reminder of Nicholas staring back at me. Mom, you can't do this, Adrian pleads, his voice cracking with emotion. I mean, you're almost 70. Starting a new romance at this age, people will talk. They'll laugh at our family, call us fake. Dad's already promised to stop seeing Aunt Lam. You've been together since you were young. Shouldn't that mean something? And your legs have healed now. I listen to my son, watching how he gestures just like his father, the same earnest expression when trying to convince someone. A bitter smile crosses my face. Should I be grateful that my legs healed? Would everything have been my fault if they hadn't? The sarcasm in my voice is sharp enough to cut. Mom, please try to understand, Adrian continues, his words tumbling out faster now. Dad's been better than most men in the entertainment industry. He's lived an upright life. Why can't you just endure a little longer? The sound of my palm striking his cheek surprises us both. It's the first time I've ever hit him, and tears spring to my eyes even as he stands there, stunned. Should I give your father a medal for doing the bare minimum? Since when did not having affairs become praiseworthy? When did basic marital loyalty become an achievement? Later, I moved back to our first house, the one I had secretly obtained through the system's points. The memory floods back. Nicholas had saved for years from his movie earnings, but when he finally had enough for a down payment, thugs robbed him. I couldn't bear to see our unborn son, Adrian, start life in a shabby rental, so I exchanged points for a house, crafting a lie about the police recovering the stolen money. The system hovers nearby, hesitating before revealing a truth I never knew. Nicholas had given money to Vivian when she left her husband. She had begged him for help, and when I lied about the house, his guilt kept him silent. That evening, as I prepare for bed, my phone buzzes. It's Vivian, somehow having found my contact information. Her message reads, "Why did you break your promise not to divorce?" I laugh bitterly as I type my response. Do you really think I changed my mind halfway? Do you honestly believe Nicholas didn't want to sign those papers? He hasn't responded to your messages, has he? Just this morning, he sent someone with breakfast, telling me to eat carefully. He claims he'll never divorce me, even if it kills him. He begs for another chance, citing our decades together and our child. This rewrite adds more emotional depth, sensory details, and clearer character motivations while maintaining the original's core conflict and revelations. I've structured it to flow more naturally as a story, with clearer transitions between scenes and more detailed character interactions. Vivian's carefully maintained facade of elegance crumbled as she unleashed a stream of vulgar curses. I almost felt pity. She still saw Nicholas as that poor, desperate young man who had once begged for my love. She didn't understand how decades of wealth and power had transformed him. In this chaotic world, everything's value had shifted, and Nicholas knew the price of everything, especially his reputation. "Save your breath from cursing," I texted back coldly. "You might want to watch the news instead. It's far more interesting than whether Nicholas will divorce me." Within the hour, the internet exploded. Nicholas and Grace Goody Charity rocketed to the top of search trends, accumulating millions of hits. The accusations were devastating: fraud, embezzlement, misuse of charitable donations to support a mistress. #Nicholas. The hypocrite and #charity fraud began trending fiercely. Initially, there was an eerie silence from mainstream media. The whistleblower account seemed to materialize from nowhere, and both Nicholas and B Corporation rushed to deny everything. Their media team scrambled to contain the damage. After all, who would dare challenge the prestigious Grace Goody Charity? Nicholas's ruthless legal team had destroyed careers for less. But this was different. Usually, such scandals died quickly under the weight of PR teams and legal threats. This time, the story grew stronger with each passing hour. Though traditional media remained silent, thousands of new accounts emerged, each armed with damning evidence. "They're trying to track and block me," I mentioned to the system. "Dream on," it replied with obvious glee, launching another wave of revelations. The information network was flooded with precisely crafted posts, each one a carefully aimed arrow at Nicholas's reputation. Chat logs, financial records, bank transfers, all meticulously documented evidence of how Nicholas had siphoned charity funds to cover B Corporation's losses. "Nicholas and B Corporation must be losing their minds," the system chuckled. "They can't figure out how anyone could gather such perfect evidence." I smiled knowingly. Of course they couldn't understand. They didn't know what the system was capable of. Every move Nicholas made, every secret meeting, every private conversation, the system saw it all. Even his bathroom breaks weren't private. Through the system's eyes, I watched chaos unfold at both the charity and B Corporation. Their employees rushed about in panic, helplessly watching their carefully constructed image crumble under the weight of public outrage. But this was just the beginning. Since midnight, similar evidence packages had been landing on the desks of regulatory agencies across the country. The mighty had fallen. Nicholas, the celebrated actor and philanthropist, was led away in handcuffs as cameras flashed around him. His head bowed, not in humility, but in shame. Nicholas, inhumane, dominated social media, with former fans unleashing their fury. The man they'd trusted, who'd built his reputation on charitable works, had been stealing from the very people he claimed to help. I remembered questioning the charity's spending years ago. Those cheap supplies sent to underprivileged children couldn't possibly have cost what the books claimed. But back then, I was painted as the villain, a bitter woman trying to tarnish a respected elderly artist's reputation. Elderly artist? More like an elderly con man funding his affair. The public's reaction was merciless. Comments flooded online. His wife was abandoned in a nursing home while he gallivanted with his mistress. First love? They're nearly 150 years old combined. Have they no shame? Vivian's the perfect example of a modern homewrecker. Someone even joked that Nicholas had set a record for the biggest celebrity scandal in the elderly community. The phone rang that afternoon. It was Adrian. "Mom, Dad wants to see you," he said, his voice heavy. "He says there are things he needs to tell you, things he might never get another chance to say." I dressed carefully for this meeting, choosing clean, neat clothes. "Come watch the show," I told the system as I prepared to leave. Adrian had posted bail, and we were to meet at Nicholas's house. The divorce agreement sat on the table like a white flag of surrender as soon as I walked in. Nicholas looked decades older than he had just yesterday, his eyes fixed on my legs in prolonged silence. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this," he finally mumbled, sliding the divorce papers toward me. The agreement showed he'd transferred all his assets to me, though after the fines, it wasn't much. "It's not a lot. but it should be enough for a comfortable retirement. Grace, I'm sorry. I studied his face, searching for traces of the young man I'd fallen in love with decades ago. Despite all his expensive treatments and maintenance, that youthful spark had vanished completely. Life's irony. Money could maintain his looks, but couldn't preserve his soul. "Mom, please forgive Dad," Adrian pleaded, standing beside his father like a loyal guardian. Nicholas slowly rose from his chair, his body bending in a deep bow of apology. The great actor's final performance, but this time, the emotions were real. Nicholas stood before me, a man who had spent his life with his head held high, now begging. How ironic. Someone had always been there to protect him, to keep his spine straight. Now here he was, bowing. "Things have come to this," he said softly. "I have nothing left to say. I just ask for one thing, some dignity." Even in his moment of defeat, his request was breathtakingly selfish. He would accept punishment for fraud, he said, but couldn't bear the stigma of adultery. Looking at him, I saw our similarities with painful clarity. We were both selfish to our cores, hypocrites who maintained our pride while doing despicable things. "Just tell the media we agreed to divorce long ago," he pleaded. "My son, grandson, all my descendants, they shouldn't have to hang their heads in shame. I beg you." Adrian, caught in his father's desperation, pulled his wife and young son to their knees. My grandson's face contorted in pain as his mother pinched his hand purple, forcing him to beg, "Grandma, please." The sight sent ice through my veins, even as it broke my heart. Dignity? His mistake? The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Before I could respond, Adrian's phone rang. I watched his face transform as he listened, anger flooding his features. "Mom, you leaked our conversation?" he exploded. "How could you be so heartless?" I left the Hua household without a word, divorce papers in hand. The system's voice was small, uncertain. "Did I do something wrong? I was afraid you'd give in when they all knelt before you. You shouldn't have to suffer like that." Relief washed over me like a cool breeze. "You did well," I assured it. Without emotions clouding my judgment, I won't be bound by their manipulation. Vivian vanished abroad again, playing the role of the delicate lady who knew nothing of the world's harshness. But her escape couldn't save her family. The B Corporation crumbled into bankruptcy, leaving her son drowning in debt and facing criminal charges. Her daughter-in-law took to live streaming, weeping and begging for her mother-in-law's return. Before fleeing, Vivian had stolen a fortune, claiming it was for her retirement. But internet sleuths traced her every move, and eventually, justice caught up with her. Adrian shut down his company and cut contact. Yet on my grandson's birthday, an invitation arrived. "Dad's in prison. My son is young. If he can't see his grandfather on his birthday, at least let him see his grandmother. Mom, we're still family, aren't we?" By then, I had returned to real charity work, the kind that actually helped people. Unlike Nicholas's showy charity work, I chose a quieter path. Last month found me in the Gobi Desert with a small team, distributing school supplies to local children. Their cheeks were flushed from the harsh climate, but their smiles, their smiles lit up the barren landscape better than any desert sun. I named my charity Rebirth. It felt fitting, not just for those we helped, but for my own new beginning. This was the dream I'd had all those years ago when I first started, before everything went wrong. Rushing to my grandson's birthday party, gifts in hand, I arrived just as they were lighting the candles. My grandson's warm hug melted something inside me as he pulled me close to help blow them out. As I fed him cake, I told him stories of my travels. The Gobi's star-strewn sky like scattered diamonds, the flower-covered mountains with their cool, gentle breezes, the rising moon over the ocean gleaming like a giant silver coin. "You've been to so many places," Adrian commented, clutching his fruit juice. His tone carried an edge of bitterness. I knew why. In his eyes, I was the selfish mother who'd severed family ties, using his pain as stepping stones to my freedom. "Here, Grandma, drink this." My grandson offered me his glass with such sweet innocence. I bent down to take a small sip. When I looked up, I caught Adrian's expression. His eyes had narrowed, radiating a coldness that chilled me to my core. His lips moved, forming words I barely caught. Sometimes, I wish she weren't my mother. The world began to spin. My chest tightened like it was filled with concrete. As I slipped from my chair, I heard the system's panicked voice. "Host, don't sleep!" But darkness was already claiming me. I survived somehow. The sterile ICU air and rhythmic beeping of machines welcomed me back to life. The system sighed with relief, then immediately presented me with a debt note. "All our earnings for a year, gone just to keep you alive. Back to work now." Adrian was arrested for attempted matricide. In ancient times, they'd have executed him by slow slicing, the system fumed. He deserves the harshest punishment possible. Using my accumulated points, I begged the system for one final visit. "What for?" it demanded. "That unfilial son doesn't deserve your time," but it relented. "Mom, Dad was right. You're not normal," Adrian said when he saw me, unsurprised by my ghostly presence before his heavily guarded cell. The son I'd raised had truly become a stranger. "This will reveal everything," the system warned. But I didn't care. Adrian's time was running short anyway. "Dad told me to hate you," Adrian began, his voice hollow. "Maybe he suspected something was wrong that day you magically produced money for the house." He shook his head repeatedly, almost like a twitch. "The maid. She recorded you talking to yourself after your legs healed. It wasn't a medical miracle, was it? The system helped you, and you traded Dad's entire reputation just to walk again. How selfish." With each accusation, the system muttered that I'd given birth to a genius who'd tried to murder his own mother. "I'm a businessman," Adrian continued, bitter pride in his voice. "Dad helped me when I needed money. He found me resources. What did you ever give me? You made me like this. You used Dad to fix your legs. He must have accumulated lots of points, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, your father had many points to exchange. But Adrian, you're a task performer too, earning points. And you spent every single one on your father and me. You have no right to reclaim them." A glowing screen materialized before Adrian's eyes. The system displayed a detailed ledger of every point I'd spent. "You're the financial expert," I said softly. "Tell me, was it a loss?" Adrian froze, his eyes wide with dawning realization. His fingers dug into his palms until they bled, his whole body trembling. His father had spent many points, yes, but the largest expenditure had been for Adrian himself. The screen shifted, showing Adrian at age 8 lying in a hospital bed. His tiny body was connected to machines, his face gray with congenital heart disease. Doctors had given up hope multiple times. I'd found a healthy heart in the system's store, but the points required were astronomical. I lost all reason then, consumed by the image of my son's pale face as he weakly called for me. Nothing mattered except saving him. I signed an illegal contract with the store, surrendering my status as a task performer. I would become mortal, bound to this world until death claimed me naturally. But now that contract was void, and I could reclaim every point I'd spent. "You thought your recovery was natural?" I asked quietly. Adrian muttered incoherently, pulling at his hair in panic. The system displayed a contemptuous emoji before asking cheerfully, "Have you confirmed the request?" I nodded, then turned to my son. "Don't worry, Adrian. You won't die. I want your healthy heart back. You don't deserve my points." The words fell heavy in the prison cell as a countdown appeared on the glowing screen. 1, 2, 3. The points flooded back into my account as Adrian clutched his chest, the familiar suffocation of his childhood illness returning like a dark tide. 2 months later, I found myself in the mountains, teaching at a small school. At 70 years old, I was the oldest teacher there, but it felt right. One late afternoon, as the sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and purple, I stood beneath an ancient tree, watching my last student of the day disappear down the winding path. Adrian's heart condition came back, the system whispered, gentle as the mountain breeze. He didn't make it. He passed away in prison. I responded firmly, though my heart trembled. My newly adopted golden dog padded over, tail wagging slowly, offering silent comfort. A memory surfaced then, Adrian as a small boy, Nicholas holding his tiny hand as they walked down a sunlit street. The image felt so real, so close I could almost touch it. Tears rolled down my cheeks before I even realized I was crying. When they told me Nicholas had collapsed upon hearing the news, that his condition was grave, I simply nodded. Standing outside my dormitory, surrounded by the wild mountain flowers my students had picked, I turned to the system. "From now on," I said softly, "don't tell me anything more about Nicholas. Tomorrow, the library gets new books. I need to rest early." The past was like a nightmare, dark, haunting, but finally fading with the dawn. For whatever years I had left, I would live them well, teaching children under these mountain skies, far from the glitter and lies of my old life. Today I sit here in these peaceful mountains, teaching at a small school at the age of 70. The fresh mountain air and innocent smiles of my students have healed wounds I thought would never close. My golden dog keeps me company as I watch the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors each evening. When the system told me about Adrian's death from his returned heart condition and Nicholas's collapse upon hearing the news, I chose silence. Standing among the wildflowers my students had lovingly picked, I made a decision. From now on, don't tell me anything more about Nicholas. Tomorrow brings new books for our library. That's what matters now. Looking back, my past feels like a fading nightmare, dark and haunting, but growing dimmer with each new dawn. The glittering world of fame, the elaborate lies, the betrayals that once consumed me, they all seem so distant now. Here in these mountains, teaching children under the vast open sky, I found something real, something true. Some might call it karma, others justice. But I've learned that the greatest revenge isn't in destroying others, it's in rebuilding yourself. Every morning when I wake up and see those eager young faces ready to learn, I know I made the right choice. My story isn't about the perfect ending, it's about finding peace on your own terms. They say time heals all wounds, but sometimes it's not time that heals you. It's what you choose to do with that time. And I choose to live my remaining years bringing light to young minds, far from the shadows of my past. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. Remember, it's never too late to start over, to stand up for yourself, to find your own path to healing. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives come after the darkest ones. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us that even in our darkest moments, hope and redemption are always possible. Until next time, this is Grace, signing off from my peaceful mountain haven.